So today we're going to be talking all about RPE. What is an RPE scale and how can you use it? Now, whether you are like myself, a sports scientist looking to use the scale with professional or maybe even youth or amateur athletes, or if you're just a weekend warrior interested in using the scale for your own training, RPE is a free, simple and scientifically validated tool that you can use to monitor someone's training load. So I'm going to briefly explain what the RPE scale is, along with some of the early research that developed it, and keep watching to the end when I'll share the biggest mistake most people make when using an RPE scale. Now, RPE is a particular type of training monitoring tool that captures both subjective and internal training load. Now, if you're not sure what those terms mean, have a look at my previous video where I explained about internal and external training load. RPE stands for Rating of Perceived Exertion, and it was first developed by Gunnar Borg, an exercise physiologist, as far back as the 60s, 70s and 80s. This is the original Borg scale, the 6 to 20 scale. Now, why 6 to 20? Well, it was based on heart rate. They were seeking a simple and cost-effective tool that you could use to capture training intensity if you didn't have access to heart rate. And so if we think simply about heart rate, 60 is roughly around resting heart rate, and very roughly speaking, 200 is often around a maximum heart rate. So this scale reflected that 60 to 200 heart rate band that many subjects' heart rate would work within when exercising. And that's also why it is not a linear scale. We see the descriptors added here at certain points. So 13 relating to somewhat hard, 15 hard, and then really trying to break down how hard the exercise actually was. And that was designed again to reflect these points of difference where heart rate responds to exercise intensity. So at that point, it was very much a measure of exercise intensity. The scale was used at the end of training to ask, how hard did you find that session? And Carl Foster, I believe, was the first to take that intensity measure and turn it into a training load measure by multiplying the RPE score by the duration of the session, and that gives us session RPE. And that was described in this paper from 1998. And if diving deeper into this research is something that's of interest to you, then I'd also recommend this paper from Carl Foster, which is open access in IJSPP, where he and some colleagues are narrating the past, present and future of monitoring training load. But now we also have the modified Borg scale. So researchers led by Carl Foster took that 6 to 20 scale and modified it into what is often called the CR 0 to 10 scale, to make it a bit more user friendly and to change it from that 6 to 20 scale to 0 to 10. Again, we can see that there are only descriptors at certain points, and it is not a linear scale. It is not a straightforward 0 to 10. Was it 7 out of 10? Was it 5 out of 10? In fact, on the officially validated modified RPE scale, hard is 5 out of 10. Because again, we are trying to differentiate in terms of exercise intensity, just how hard was that session. And so research has explored whether the two different scales, the 6 to 20 and the 0 to 10, can be used interchangeably. So papers such as this one from Arnie and colleagues in IJSPP, which explored the use of the two scales, in this case with recreational but systematically training subjects, and here found that they were interchangeable scales. So now the 0 to 10, generally speaking, is the more popular scale that is used in applied practice. And the use of RPE has been validated in a whole variety of sports and also settings and subject populations. For instance, this paper from Franco and Pellizzeri and some big name colleagues, which was one of the first to really explore the use of session RPE as a measure of training load in soccer. Research has also explored the use of using RPE in resistance training setting, so in the weight room. Although there are other measures such as repetitions in reserve, but the research has shown that it is a valid measure to use in those settings. And I myself wrote about RPE within this publication with Professor Mike McGuigan a number of years ago, in that it is a cost-effective, simple, validated tool. So whilst now there are a multitude of technologies available to practitioners, we mustn't forget these simple tools that we have available to us. But as I promised, I wanted to talk about the big mistake that people make when using the RPE scales. So here, if we put RPE scale into Google Images, we suddenly get a rainbow of color. And we may be able to spot here the original 6 to 20 scale from ResearchGate. But every other scale shown here on this internet search includes colors. Some of them have smiley faces. Some of them have grouped together the different numbers. And some of them have added descriptors to different levels. None of these approaches are validated. The original RPE scales published in the literature, whether it is the 6 to 20 Borg scale or the modified 0 to 10 scale, those have been validated in scientific research. There are reasons for the numbers, as we've discussed, and there are also reasons for the descriptors and for the gaps. And so adding colors or smiley faces or additional descriptors is moving away from the validated tools. Yes, as someone who has used RPE with professional athletes, I understand there's sometimes confusion around the gaps, and so it may seem helpful to athletes to provide a descriptor at every level. But that approach can introduce bias, it can influence the numbers that they are giving you, and therefore that is moving away from the scientifically validated RPE scales that should be used from a scientific perspective. So whether you're using the RPE scale for your own training or with athletes, youngsters that you work with, I would just ask that you use the scientifically validated Borg scales that we have discussed today. RPE is a simple, free-to-use tool that can give insight to how your athletes found the intensity of the exercise. And then it can be combined with duration to track loads over time. And interestingly, when internal and external loads diverge, that can be really insightful in terms of athlete response to training load. And for more on that topic, check out my previous video talking about internal and external training loads. I'll have the references coming up soon if you want to dive deeper into any of the research I've shown you today. Thank you for watching, and if you like this video, please subscribe and keep a lookout for my next Sports Science Insights video.